We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Some puzzling new developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
The first place investigators looked wasn't inside Nancy Guthrie's home. It was everything that happened before anyone realized she was gone. February 1, 2026, Catalina Foothills, Tucson. An 84-year-old woman vanishes from the house she had lived in for years. No broken locks. No shattered glass. No signs that anything violent forced its way in. Just a quiet, unexplained absence. And the last person known to see her alive wasn't a stranger. It was someone close to her. Her son-in-law. That alone placed him within the scope of the investigation. But what followed in the days after is what made his presence impossible to overlook. While search teams combed through desert terrain, while helicopters swept across open land, and while her family stood in front of cameras asking the public for help, he remained silent. No public statements. No visible urgency. No outward reaction that people typically expect when someone close disappears. That silence didn't prove anything, but it stood out. And in missing person cases, behavior matters. Tommaso Sione's behavior didn't match anyone else connected to Nancy. To understand why his name surfaced so quickly, investigators started with the last confirmed timeline. Not speculation. Not assumptions. Just verified facts. Nancy had spent that evening at her daughter Annie's home. It was routine. Dinner, conversation, nothing unusual reported. No arguments. No visible tension. Later that night, Tommaso drove her back home. That part is clear. He arrived at her residence, a quiet neighborhood where anything out of place tends to be noticed. According to statements, he waited long enough to see her safely enter. The garage door opened. She went inside. He left. That moment became the final confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie alive. After that, everything becomes unclear. But investigations rely on timelines, not uncertainty. So they narrowed the window. Her doorbell camera stopped functioning at 1:47 a.m. Her pacemaker, which continuously records heart activity, sent its final signal at 2:28 a.m. That gap became critical. Something happened inside that house between those two times. When investigators entered, they weren't looking for obvious damage. They were looking for consistency. Does the scene match a normal night? In this case, it didn't. There were no signs of forced entry. That immediately ruled out certain possibilities. Because forced entry usually leaves marks. Damaged locks. Broken frames. None of that was present. Which suggests a different kind of access. Someone who didn't need to break in. Then came the security system. It hadn't simply malfunctioned. It had been accessed remotely using correct login credentials. That changed everything. This wasn't random interference. Whoever interacted with it knew exactly how it worked. And when to act. At that point, investigators shifted their thinking. Not who could get in, but who already had access. At the same time, attention turned to the vehicle that brought Nancy home. It was taken early for examination. Not because it proved anything immediately, but because it was the last controlled environment tied to her movements. Vehicles can hold trace evidence. Fibers. Biological material. Timelines people can't recall. Around then, media coverage intensified. A report suggested Tommaso was being considered internally as a key figure. Not charged, not confirmed, but under focus. Once that information became public, perception changed quickly. Photos surfaced soon after. Tommaso and Annie leaving their home. He partially covered his face. She avoided the cameras. Individually, those actions could mean many things. Stress. Privacy. Pressure. But together, they added to a growing public narrative. Meanwhile, investigators stayed methodical. Search warrants were issued. Devices collected. Interviews conducted. Then came an unexpected update. Authorities stated the family had been cleared through evidence review, including DNA analysis. That should have settled speculation, but it didn't fully. Because once doubt enters public perception, it doesn't disappear easily. At this point, the investigation split. Public opinion moved one way. The actual case moved another. Behind the scenes, forensic work became more complex. DNA recovered wasn't clean. It was mixed, meaning multiple contributors. That slows everything down. Profiles must be separated carefully. It takes time. At the same time, another process began. Cellular mapping. Every phone connecting to nearby towers during that timeframe was logged. Not suspects, just data. Patterns were built. Movement tracked. And something began to stand out. Not a single device, but repeated behavior. Certain devices appeared multiple times, even before the night Nancy disappeared. Dates like January 11th and January 24th became relevant. That introduced a new possibility. This wasn't random. It may have been planned. Investigators shifted their focus. Not just what happened that night, but when it started. While all of this unfolded in labs and data systems, Nancy's family asked the public for help. They highlighted specific dates and asked people to check cameras and memories. Because sometimes the smallest detail matters later. That's where the case remains, between evidence and unknowns. Between data and memory. Because one question still hasn't been answered. Where is Nancy Guthrie? Everything leads back to that window. 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m. something happened inside that house. It left traces, but no conclusion yet. As the investigation progressed, focus shifted to inconsistencies. The timing wasn't random. Systems didn't fail unpredictably. The camera was accessed deliberately. The pacemaker stopped within a defined window. That alignment suggested control. Logs showed valid access to the system. Not a hack. The cameras were placed into a paused state. That sequence matters. Disable visibility, then act. That's not panic. That's process. Inside the home, there was no widespread disruption. Nothing suggesting a chaotic struggle. Whatever happened was contained. No noise was reported. No disturbances flagged. That limits possibilities. It suggests something controlled and brief. Investigators began building a behavioral profile. Someone familiar with the home. The system. The routine. Outside, cellular data continued revealing patterns. Some devices went silent during the critical window. That absence stood out. Meanwhile, repeated presence on earlier dates reinforced the idea of preparation. Video analysis added another layer. A vehicle appeared outside the initial search radius. Not obvious, but consistent. That forced investigators to expand their scope. A glove was later recovered near a roadside. It contained mixed DNA. Again, complex. Again, slow. Cody's returned no matches, leading to genetic genealogy. A longer process. At the same time, movement patterns showed direction. Away from the home. Toward the desert. Search teams followed that lead with targeted sweeps. Terrain made it difficult. Evidence fades quickly there. Tire impressions, if found early, can be critical. If not, they're lost. Investigators return to what couldn't change. Data. Logs. Timelines. The same pattern kept appearing. Controlled access. Precise timing. Pre-event presence. Post-event movement. This didn't look random. It looked prepared. By this stage, the investigation began narrowing. Multiple independent elements started aligning. The timeline held steady. Investigators reconstructed it again, focusing on sequence. Outside the home, expanded video review revealed a clearer pattern. A vehicle moving outward, toward less populated areas. Cellular analysis reinforced it. Some devices present before were absent during the key window. That break in pattern mattered. Preparation requires knowledge. And knowledge narrows the field. Forensic work continued. Slowly. Carefully. Behavior after the event was also analyzed. Communication patterns. Movement consistency. Not proof, but indicators. Search areas became more focused. Not broad, but precise. The investigation reached a point of clarity. Not resolution, but structure. The event wasn't random. It wasn't forced. It wasn't chaotic. But one thing is still missing. Location. Until Nancy is found, the case remains open. It is still active. Still moving. Quietly. Internally, investigators are closer than before. Evidence is beginning to align. And when that happens, outcomes become clearer. Not publicly yet. But internally. This is the phase where cases are tested. Not expanded. Proven. Every timeline. Every piece of data. Every forensic detail. Cross-checked. Because proof requires precision. The timeline remains unchanged. 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m. Everything must fit inside it. Sequence reveals intent. Control defines behavior. Data is now being connected, not collected. Devices are filtered down to a few. Patterns are examined across time. Video footage is no longer searched broadly. Only confirmed against known details. Forensic analysis continues at its own pace. DNA work, especially mixed samples, takes time. But when complete, it provides identity. And identity changes everything. Search efforts continue in targeted zones. Areas where data, movement, and geography align. Every step now is deliberate. Because mistakes weaken cases. Outside of all this, one thing remains unchanged. A family waiting for answers. This isn't about data to them. It's about where she is. Nancy Guthrie is not just a case. She is a person who disappeared from a life that should have continued. And until she is found, this story isn't over. If you know anything, even something small, this is the time to come forward. Contact the FBI. Submit a tip. You don't need proof. You don't need certainty. One detail can change everything.